Throwing my hat in the ring. Today I am reviewing the Batman movies, or I should say ranking the Batman movies. I've seen a lot of people online doing this, and it sounded like fun, and I've done it myself lots of times. I rank everything. I am very much a list kind of person, have been all my life. I used to rank my favorite stand-up comedians. I mean, I've done ranking lists for just about everything. So what's the value in this? Because there's so many more of them out there, what does my opinion matter? Well, I can't really say that it matters that much. I'm not going to be too arrogant here, but I am a big Batman fan, have been a Batman fan most of my life, certainly since I started reading Batman comics back in the 80s, but even before that I was watching the Adam West Batman TV show, and of course I saw Batman on Super Friends and other things like that. Batman was just very present, and then the Batman movie came out in 1989, and suddenly Batman was all the rage. I started collecting Batman comics. My very first comic was a Batman comic where he fights the KG Beast, as in the Beast of the KGB, the old Soviet police state, and that tells you how old I am, because that was a new comic at the time. But that was my introduction to Batman, and I've loved Batman ever since. He was one of the comics I collected all four of his ongoing comics through the 90s, and I have seen most of the Batman movies. I've seen all the ones that were released in theaters, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. Also, I'm going to give these in a writer's perspective. So, not just that I'm a Batman fan, but also I'm a writer, so I'm going to try to give you my take on it as a writer. What did each film do right? What could it have improved with the writing? And what can we take away from each film as writers? Let's dive right in. So again, I am just doing the Batman movies that have been released on film. I'm also restricting it to those that have Batman as a main character and as a title character. So Batman must appear in the title, and the movie must have been released in the theaters. So that leaves us with 12 movies before The Batman, which again comes out tomorrow if I release this on time. So with those caveats, let's dive right in. Number 12, coming in last place, we have, surprise, surprise, Batman and Robin, Joel Schumacher. Yeah, this one is hard to watch. It's pretty fascinating, honestly, when you're watching a film where every decision, every choice is wrong. From bat nipples to terrible puns to a bat credit card to the most illogical villain alliance since ever. Villains should present a credible threat to the heroes, and not because the heroes are for some reason incompetent, which they apparently are in this film. The villains themselves, why would Mr. Freeze team up with Poison Ivy when Mr. Freeze wants to freeze the whole world to save his wife somehow, and Poison Ivy wants to save the plant life in the world by covering the world in plants? Those are completely incompatible goals. So this movie is just, it's hard to watch. It's painful sometimes, but it can be very entertaining if you do a riff tracks kind of thing with it. Just riff it as it goes along, or watch the riff tracks of it. But it's still worth viewing for what not to do. I always tell people that it's good to learn what not to do from what you read and what you watch, as well as what to do. Moving on, number 11, The Killing Joke. And this one is less that it was fundamentally bad, although it certainly is in many ways, but more that it's just in really poor taste. Alan Moore, the author of the comic graphic novel on which it's based, The Killing Joke, which is one of the most well-known, canonical, and most beloved Batman stories of all time, as well as most critically praised, just does not get a good film treatment here. And Alan Moore pretty much says this about all of his comics. He has a very strong opinion on the differences between media, and it's not that he hates movies, but he thinks that comics are a completely different medium than movies, and he's right about that. But he thinks that they are untranslatable into each other, and I don't 100% agree with him there, but I see his point in that there are things that you can do in comics that cannot be done in movies. The way comics transition from panel to panel and from page to page is not something that a movie can emulate. There are too many differences between them. For more, that means that you should just simply never try to adapt a comic into a movie. And I don't completely agree with him on that. But on this one, my God, did they almost prove him right. Yeah, the film it's a shame and disgrace compared to its source material. Of course, the core story is great. It is the Killing Joke story. But turning it into a film does nothing to improve it. And some of the additions are just... no. Batgirl... no. Just... no. That does not work. I can't even. Reinventing characters is one thing, but entirely assassinating them is a very different thing. It's inexcusable. Don't do it. If you're going to reinvent a character, take a new approach to him, that's fine. If you're just writing fan fiction, then do whatever you want. But if you are actually trying to write a legitimate story with a legitimate character, don't just destroy the character. Don't just do something that the character would not do with no reason or rhyme behind it. It just doesn't make sense. Please don't. And don't put these images in people's minds. Nobody wanted to see this. Nobody was asking for it except somebody who might have had an interesting social life in the DC gallery. Oh well. Moving on. Number 10, Batman Forever. It is extremely campy, but entertainingly campy. But it is ultimately weak. It's not nearly as bad as Batman and Robin, and not as distasteful as The Killing Joke. But the villains lack polarization. That is one of the big writing problems with this film. Each villain is a reflection of the other. Instead of playing Two-Face like Two-Face is in the comics, where he's very much a straight man, Tommy Lee Jones plays him exactly the same way Jim Carrey plays the Riddler. And Jim Carrey plays the Riddler as Jim Carrey playing the Riddler. And so Tommy Lee Jones plays Two-Face as Jim Carrey playing Two-Face. And the lack of polarization leads to a lack of character. But it is still worth watching. And at the time, when I saw it in the theaters, it was a welcome break from the bleakness of the Tim Burton films, which I do like, and I like obviously better than these, but still, it was a nice change of pace. I liked some of the callback jokes that were in there, and it calls back some of the fun of earlier Batman iterations, pre-Burton Batman iterations. But it does need bigger differences between the villains and between Batman and Robin. Chris O'Donnell is about the same age as Val Kilmer, and he kind of acts like it. He's written to be not much younger. He's written as supposedly a teenage brat, but he's definitely not a teenager, and there's no reason for a grown man to be adopting another grown man. That doesn't work very well. So writers, don't forget to differentiate your characters and make sure your hero's love interest adds something substantive to the story. I had to throw that note in there because I'd entirely forgotten about her. So that's how memorable she was. Make sure your hero's love interest is important. Number 9, Batman v Superman. This is another dark and gritty take on Batman, just like Christopher Nolan's trilogy was. But this one's missing the fun of Nolan's trilogy. And with a similarly dark Superman attached, there's no balance. Both the heroes are unfun. What they should be is a foil for each other. And in the best Batman-Superman stories, you've got ultra-serious, dark Batman, and you've got much lighter, heroic, hopeful Superman balancing each other. They serve as foils for each other. And that's why Batman and Superman make a great team, and also make pretty good enemies now and then. But unfortunately here, they're just too similar. Like, by the time Superman says Martha, he's pretty much saying, hey, we're the same, and Batman has to be like, oh yeah, we are the same. We even have the same mom's name. Which is also a pretty lame payoff. Don't write like that. That's one writing lesson to take from Batman v Superman. But yeah, another is to use the characters to bring out each other's character traits into sharper relief by their differences. So Han Solo versus Luke Skywalker. Let's say Luke Skywalker is a young, naive, but very dedicated and hopeful young man, whereas Han is a cynical, world-weary, selfishly driven older man. as opposed to Luke's idealism. So they're very contrasting characters, yet they are allies. They're on the same side, but they serve as foils for each other, and you could see them fighting now and then. So if you're setting two characters against each other, remember, it's best if they're polarized in some way. They should have some things in common, but they should have some things that are opposite. That's the only way that the true conflict is going to come out. Number 8, The Dark Knight Rises. So, this was an epic spectacle on the first watch, with all of Gotham basically collapsing on itself and the whole football field imploding, and there's just so many crazy things. Bane taking over the city. It gets pretty crazy, and props to Nolan for taking some risks and taking some dares and stretching himself on this one, trying to do something different and new. At least a little bit different and new. But he's trying to combine several Batman stories into one, which is part of the problem. He combines the Bane storyline, where Bane breaks the Batman, with the storyline where Gotham gets set off as a separate country into itself, separate from the rest of the U.S., and becomes basically a crime haven. Those stories are set 2 decades apart. They were written 2 decades apart, or roughly that. And they don't really combine very well. So, not the best story choice. No one really stretches the bounds of credulity 2 to 3 times, or 3 to 4 times too often. And it's hard to stay invested if you can't suspend disbelief. Also, Bruce Wayne goes through the same character arc twice, which isn't necessary. It's still fun. I mean, it's fun to watch, but by far, it's the weakest and least memorable of Nolan's trilogy. I mean, how did the cops live in the subway for 6 months and continue to shave? It doesn't make sense. A wild imagination is great. Don't forget to rein it in with an engaging and somehow, at least in some way, logical story structure. That's what Nolan lost. The first 2 movies are very tightly structured, very, very well told in a way that they build on themselves. But by contrast, The Dark Knight Rises is just a chaotic mess. Its storylines go in all different directions, and they only converge by forcing it at the very end. Number 7, Batman Returns. Some people place this lower than I do, some people place it higher. I get that. I do like this one. This is aesthetically cool and very different from pretty much any other movie except for all of Tim Burton's other movies. But ultimately, it's a little too weird for a Batman film. And I do like weird movies, and I like movies that take risks. But there are certain things you expect from Batman and Batman's universe that this one just kind of goes overboard or outside the bounds with. And it doesn't make it bad. It's just different and not what I'm usually looking for when I'm looking for a Batman film. The villains are great in themselves. I mean, Christopher Walken plays, I don't even remember his name, but he's Christopher Walken. That's all that you need to know. Danny DeVito is an incredibly creepy penguin. A little too creepy sometimes, I would say. Michelle Pfeiffer is, my childhood crush. Oh, she totally hit the Catwoman out of the park. That was great. But Danny DeVito's Penguin is a little too off-putting. Everyone's motivations either seem simplistic or confused. And it's really more a Tim Burton passion project. Still, for the aesthetics alone, this is a great one for writers to watch and to challenge their descriptive skills. Like the way the world is built and the way all the pieces are put together visually. Like someone had to lay that out. Someone had to put those ideas into a story. So work on your description. Work on creating villains that are interesting and weird and memorable, like Danny DeVito's Penguin biting a guy's nose off, or Michelle Pfeiffer in tight black leather saying meow right before a building blows up. You just can't really ask for a more weird movie than this, but still, it gives us some creepy Christmas fun and definitely worth a watch. Number 6, Batman the Movie, 1966. Unapologetically campy, with an iconic lineup of villains and some of the greatest lines in movie history.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb, indeed. It's Batman for kids, but perfect for kids of all ages. This one is more of a humorous parody than a serious take on the Batman mythos. The entire Batman series that ran from 1966 to 1968 is just more of a parody, and definitely more of a kid's show than anything else. But injecting some levity into your writing while still holding on to the principles of story structure, which this story does, can make for a very entertaining story, especially if you have some great dialogue like they have here, where Batman tells Robin, they may be drinkers, Robin, but they're still human beings. Number 5, Lego Batman. Captures everything that Batman is supposed to be, the fun and the heart, all in an engaging, cross-universe, family-friendly story, zeroing in on Batman's loneliness and turning the main conflict into a lover's quarrel between the Joker and Batman. That adds both humor and pathos to the characters, and it really fleshes out Batman for a new generation. Really, it does not undermine him. It does him justice, kind of the way Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse really does justice to the Spider-Man mythos, even though it's not using the original Spider-Man as its main character. It still gives us a true Spider-Man story. Lego Batman gives us a true Batman story. So what writers can learn from this is that model approaches can pay off. Don't be afraid to try something different, even if it's a mishmash of older ideas, even if it's combining characters from different universes, from different thought processes in your own head, say. See what you can do by mixing things up and playing with tone. You can have a semi-serious tone that's still lighthearted and fun and for kids. Or you can have a dark and somber tone that is only for adults. Or you can have a lighthearted, happy-go-lucky tone that is very much for adults because it's too adult. Number 4, Batman 1989. This was my Batman. This was the Batman movie for me and all my peers, even though my parents wouldn't let me go see it in the theaters because I was not quite 13 yet. I think I was 11 or something around there. Not quite 13. It was a PG-13 film. And of course, it was Tim Burton, who was already established as kind of weird and creepy with Edward Scissorhands. Now, well, Batman 1989 made Batman grown up. It set the benchmark for atmosphere and tone, for the way we think of Batman when we think of him today. It's dark, but still comic booky. Still got the campy edge to it. Not as campy as Schumacher's films later on, but still, it's still a comic book movie, and I like that. That should be something that we shouldn't shy away from. You can't just condemn a film for its choice of style. I mean, you can if that's not your pick of the litter, if you have a certain style you prefer, but just the choice of style is not the end-all, be-all of a film. A film can be dark and somber, like Zack Snyder's film, and can still be well done. A film can be lighthearted and campy, like Batman 89, and still be well done. So, Batman 89 is a little bit of dark and light, I should say. Batman 66 is light and campy. This ties Batman's origin story to the Joker. So Batman is tied to the Joker right from the start. And Batman himself is there at the creation of the Joker. So each one sort of creates the other. Now, this might not be the best move for an ongoing Batman story, but it is a good one for a standalone film, which this very well could have been. I don't think Burton knew that he was going to get a sequel when he first made this. It gives a compelling setup and a satisfying payoff. It gives your villain and a hero personal connections, so you should do that too. Think of a personal connection to give your villain and hero, to build conflict, internal and external, from the very beginning. Stories do this in a kind of haphazard way, or they make it just too cliche. Think of an original way. Think of a more interesting way. In this case, Jack Napier killed Batman's parents, and then Batman dropped Jack Napier into a vat of acid. The fact that each one created the other at a separate time, and the younger one created the older one when the older one was even older, and the older one created the younger one when they were both younger. It's an interesting juxtaposition. And like I said, polarization is good. So they had that similarity, that tie together, that they each created the other, but they also have this contrast. They're very, very differently motivated, and differently oriented characters. So give your hero and villain a personal connection to build conflict. Number 3, The Dark Knight. Phenomenal villain, huge personal stakes in the story for Bruce Wayne. The setups and payoffs are top-notch. Watch this one for story structure. The good guys' goals, how the bad guys undermine those goals each step of the way, and how the good guys win what ultimately comes a Pyrrhic victory. Pretty much at each plot point, the heroes win some kind of victory, and it ends up being a bigger total loss. Even right up until the end of the film, which I'm not going to spoil. If you haven't seen it yet, definitely worth seeing, but it's got one of those endings that is not 100% in either direction. And that is one of the signs of a more mature film, a more mature story idea, is that it ends with some ambiguity in its ending. So it's not a pure tragedy. You wouldn't expect a superhero story to be a pure tragedy, but it's not an out-and-out comedy either. It's not a everybody on the good side wins and everybody's okay and everything goes back to normal at the end. Each positive step is undercut. And each time that happens, the stakes are raised. So each ensuing conflict in the film gets deeper and deeper and deeper. So try structuring your stories with a similar build. How can you make conflicts build on each other so that the stakes are raised each time, and each time that the protagonist wins a small victory, he faces an even larger defeat. Number 2, Mask of the Phantasm. Underknown and underrated. This is a spin-off from the Batman TV show, and it is as great as its source material. If you didn't see the Batman TV show in the 90s, you really are missing out on something. Go watch that. Batman is implicated in assassinations committed by a new, more murderous vigilante in Mask of the Phantasm here, and he must catch the culprit and clear his name. In the meantime, an old love interest is coming back into Bruce Wayne's life, and he must deal with conflicting loyalties in this case. Does he want to remain Batman? Does he want to get back in this romantic relationship? And this film gives equal weight and care to both sides of Batman's life, and even includes the Joker coming in for a brief appearance. And we have Kevin Conroy from the show voicing Batman, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, voicing the Joker just like he does in the show. Possibly the 2 greatest iterations of these characters ever. And that's what makes it one of the greatest Dark Knight tales. The fact that it gives equal weight and care to both sides of Batman/Bruce Wayne. So think about how you can make your own characters' conflicts multifaceted like that. How can they have conflicts at multiple levels, both internal and external conflicts? Not just with an opponent, but sometimes with the people they love. Before I give you number 1, guys, if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. That really helps the algorithm out. And if you could comment on the video, say what you agree with, what you disagree with, just post your list of your favorite Batman movies. I would be happy to join in the debate with you, and that really helps the algorithm as well. So I appreciate every like, every comment. Thank you, guys. Subscribe to the channel. And moving on to number 1, Batman Begins. You should have picked this one out now if you hadn't, if you've been keeping track. Many people put The Dark Knight above this one. A lot of people put The Dark Knight as their number 1. Some put Mask of the Phantasm, who are in the know. And it's hard to argue with those. Actually, a lot of people I've been talking to, some of the people who are close to me who I very much respect, my son, my best friend, they both put the Lego Batman movie as their number 1. Because, of course, I'm really ranking these by enjoyability. I'm ranking them by quality, too, but for me, enjoyability is a major part of the quality of a film. And so that's how I'm ranking them. And I can't really rank them as which ones I'd rather see now, because I've probably seen Batman Begins more than any of them, more often than any of them. I saw it several times in the theaters, and then I've seen it, I owned it on film for a while, and now it's on streaming, and I've seen it so many times. But still, it's a story that just, it puts us in Bruce Wayne's shoes and lets us feel what it's like to become Batman. And it is the closest we're going to see, or that we've seen so far anyway, to a live-action version of my favorite Batman story, Frank Miller's Batman Year One. There is an animated version of that film on HBO, but it is one of those straight-to-video films, and it's a pretty good animated version, but I highly recommend reading the comic. Moving on, it is a perfect blend of the darker, more realistic elements and the lighter, more fantastic elements that make up the Batman comics. That's what this Batman Begins is. It gives us the perfect arc. It shows how Bruce Wayne truly becomes. He doesn't just disguise himself as the Batman. He truly becomes the Batman. Like, his identity shifts as this goes on. As the external threats ramp up, so do Bruce's internal conflicts. He must draw on all of his resources and all of his resourcefulness to wrest victory from the jaws of defeat. It's rare that a movie invests me this much in a character. Writers, put your audience in the shoes of your protagonist. Let them feel his heartaches and triumphs. Continually raise the stakes and make the hero grow to meet those stakes, and your readers will follow you to the gates of hell and beyond. And so, that is my list, guys. Agree with it or disagree, love it or hate it. Batman and Robin, The Killing Joke, Batman Forever, Batman v Superman, The Dark Knight Rises, Batman Returns, Batman the Movie, 1966, Lego Batman, Batman 1989, The Dark Knight, Mask of the Phantasm, and Batman Begins. Hope you guys enjoyed this list, and if you disagree or have something to add on or comment on, by all means, put that in the comments below. Again, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time. Until then, happy writing. Peace.